Now that Joe Biden is out of the race, the big question is, what happens now? So, Politico put out this handy little piece. What happens next now that Biden has dropped out? So, they broke this into neat little sections. So, who is the next Democratic nominee? Biden's endorsement of Vice President Kamala Harris gives her a major leg up in the fight for the nomination, but that doesn't mean it's a slam dunk. Although Biden faced only nominal opposition in the Democratic primary and won nearly every contest, he was not yet the party's official nominee, and he cannot make a unilateral decision. Broadly, when Americans vote in primaries, they are not voting directly for a candidate, but kicking off a process that will ultimately send delegates to the party's national convention. Those delegates are the ones who officially pick the nominee, and the Democrats' convention hasn't happened yet. The convention is scheduled for August 19th through the 22nd in Chicago, although party leaders were considering a virtual roll call to name the nominee earlier in the month. The DNC must now decide if it wants to carry through with its plan. All of those nearly 3,800 Biden delegates have now become free agents. Even with Biden's endorsement, the delegates who were pledged to him are under no obligation, according to the DNC's rules, to follow his lead and support his chosen successor. Now, the real question here is, does the DNC wait until the convention to do this, or do they just push Kamala through from, what was it, July 31st to the 5th or something, or August 1st to the 7th? The first, like last week of July,
I think it was
first week
the
of
1st
August.
to the 7th, yeah, or July 30th to the
July
7th.
30th to August 7th. That's when they're going to do this virtual roll call vote. And so the question here is, do they stick with that plan? AOC did a truly ludicrous Instagram Live video the other day suggesting that if they tried to swap Joe Biden out, it would create all kinds of ballot access challenges that would ultimately go to the Supreme Court, and the scary right-wing court would deem Biden ineligible in all the swing states, and they would steal the election. Obviously, total nonsense. That theory has not gained traction anywhere else because it's totally not true, just a bunch of gaslighting bullshit. We had a whole piece prepared on that tonight, kind of moot now, given the fact that Joe Biden has dropped out. But what's not moot is the question of, do they actually take this to the convention and open it up to the floor, where you'll have theoretically some debate, assuming somebody else steps up and challenges Kamala. So far, nobody has, as of this recording at least. Or do they just go through and do this virtually? The pro-democracy thing to do would be to have a brokered convention. Do they give a shit about that? Is there anybody in the party that gives a shit about that? Is there anyone in the party who cares enough to demand that? Probably not. That's my guess. And my guess is they're going to want a nominee squared away heading into the convention, so they can get all the signage
they can
and
build
the shit
the convention around it. Yeah,
exactly. So my guess is they're going to go through with the virtual roll call, but that still is a question. And this is why I think Kamala Harris has it so locked up. Who can run for the nomination? So who is eligible to throw their hat in the ring and say, okay, now that it's not Biden, I'm running? Anyone who can garner enough signatures to have their name placed in nomination. Candidates need signatures from at least 300, but no more than 600 delegates. Don't forget, this is not you go out on the streets like we did with Jose and get signatures. It is now in the delegates' hands, not the voters' hands. So if you want to submit yourself for nomination, you need the signatures of at least 300 delegates, and delegates can sign only one candidate's petition. Additionally, a candidate could not submit more than 50 delegates from a given state, a provision to ensure that all candidates placed in nomination earn support from a broad swath of the country. There are roughly 4,700 delegates, capping the number of possible candidates at around 15, but functionally there will be far fewer. The pressure to avoid a messy nomination will be enormous. Not only will the pressure to avoid a messy nomination be enormous, but who has access to 300 DNC delegates? Like, who has the contact information of these delegates where they can go up to them and get their signature, or they can they could rub elbows with them and grease them. Like, this is now an insider's game. This is now open to
course,
anybody.
yeah.
You need to know 300 fucking who knows 300 delegates. Kamala knows 300 delegates. Newsom probably knows 300 delegates. Whitmer, I'm sure Hillary Clinton does. I mean, outside that, you're talking about a very small number of people who are even who can even possibly throw their hat into the ring. You add that to the fact that Biden has already endorsed Kamala. The Clintons have already endorsed Kamala. You know, I mean, we don't have a full list. I think Adam Schiff endorsed Kamala today. I mean, the list of people who are endorsing her now is going to be growing by the hour. How's anybody going to get their foot in the door against Kamala? It's almost impossible.
Well, you know, Jimmy, I talked to him about this. He has a press pass to get onto the floor. Maybe, you know, I mean, I think he should try to talk to some of these delegates while he's in there.
Run. Yeah, exactly.
Run. It's not too late.
Who are the delegates, and how does the roll call vote work? Of the 4,700 convention delegates, just under 4,000 are pledged delegates awarded according to the results of the presidential primaries earlier this year. Biden won roughly 95% of them, according to the Green Papers, a website that tracks the arcane process of delegate selection. There are another roughly 750 automatic delegates, the group once known as superdelegates. They are elected officials, party leaders, and former luminaries like former presidents Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and Jimmy Carter, and former DNC chairs. After the 2016 campaign, these automatic delegates were stripped of their role in the first round of voting and only get to vote for the nominee in subsequent rounds if no candidate earns a majority on the first ballot, or if that rule is waived, as was the case in 2020 when Biden had the support of a majority of pledged delegates. There are questions about whether the DNC will continue with that plan now that Biden has ended his campaign. If the vote instead occurs on the convention floor, DNC rules provide 20 minutes of nominating speeches for every certified candidate prior to the first ballot. Again, you're talking maybe 3 or 4 tops. I doubt it's even going to be that. I doubt it's going to be anybody, to be honest with you. They might have like a... Who was the hapless schmuck who ran in 2016 as a symbolic thing? Martin O'Malley, right?
Oh, that
Because
guy.
they didn't want it to look like a coronation, so they got some idiot to run. They might do something like that if they take it to the convention, which is a big if. But I don't think that's going to come into play. If no candidate earns a majority of the first ballot, automatic delegates join the voting on the second round, meaning the superdelegates could push Kamala over the top. That is almost certainly going to be moot. What happens to Biden's campaign infrastructure and the money? Okay, so this was a big question that a lot of people had. What happens to the money that he raised? And Politico even doesn't have a clear answer. So this is going to be interesting.
I've read different things about this.
Yeah, nobody seems to know. Nobody seems to know. As of the end of June, Biden's campaign had $96 million in the bank and staffers and field offices across the country. That's a massive amount of infrastructure. Who gets it now? There is no real precedent for a ticket switch in this era of big money elections. But many campaign finance experts have argued that as long as Harris remains on the ticket, potentially as the presidential nominee, but also if she is nominated for vice president again, she can fairly seamlessly assume control of that bank account. The money, after all, was given to a Biden-Harris committee registered for both of them, not just the president. Like I said, I don't know if I buy that, and it seems like they don't know if they buy that either. This view is not universally held. Charlie Spies, a prominent Republican election lawyer who briefly worked as the RNC's chief counsel earlier this year, before reportedly being chased off by Trump and his allies, argued in a Wall Street Journal op-ed that Harris was not entitled to that money, raising the specter that somebody would try to block that handoff in court. Campaigns can also make unlimited transfers to their respective party committees, so perhaps the cleanest outcome, especially if Harris is not on the ticket, would be the Biden campaign giving his cash to the Democratic National Committee, which could then spend it on the upcoming elections. But all of this is unprecedented territory. And finally...
Yeah, I read something that said the DNC could put it into a PAC that supports the campaign, or they could use it to support campaigns, as that says, but they couldn't just give it to the Kamala campaign. that would be illegal because I guess people didn't donate for that. It's really cockamamie.
It's very difficult to say. Like I said, there's not really a clear answer because the super PAC is not the campaign, and there are laws that forbid direct communication. So, yeah, I mean, you could put that to use in the interest of the candidate, but that's different from actually giving it to the campaign, who could then allocate
then you would
it the
lose
way they see
control
fit.
over how it's used. Yeah,
exactly. They could blow it all on TV ads or whatever. Most modern presidents. How has this ever happened before? Most modern presidents have sought a second term, with Lyndon B. Johnson as a notable exception. After assuming the remainder of JFK's term and winning a full term outright in 1964, Johnson was planning on running again in 1968, but he was dragged down by the unpopular Vietnam War and only squeaked out a win in the New Hampshire primary. A vulnerable Johnson facing the anti-war Eugene McCarthy and a late entrance from Robert Kennedy announced to a shocked nation in March 1968 that he would no longer seek the party's nomination for president. Soon after, Hubert Humphrey, his vice president, would launch a campaign of his own. The assassination of RFK obviously changed the dynamics of the race, and Humphrey won the nomination on the first ballot at a convention in Chicago that turned violent around the debate over the Vietnam War and the party platform. Humphrey went on to lose to Richard Nixon that November. In that case, obviously, you had you had Lyndon Johnson drop out fairly early in the process, not this late in the process. So you had more a conventional campaign take shape after LBJ announced he would no longer seek a second term, or a third term, a second and a half term. So you had a more orderly transition to the new nominee. So has this ever happened before in modern history? Yes and no, but not really. Because now the primaries are over. Not like this. Exactly.
It's quite remarkable. Nobody seems to know, because I've read like 3 different articles on this, and they've all covered the question of what can and can't be done with the money differently. It seems like it might have to go to court because it doesn't seem like anybody really knows.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't seem like anybody has any real idea about the money, or even about how this process is going to happen, because the DNC is not saying at this moment, and for all we know, this could be changing because things are happening very quickly. Are they going to take this to the convention in Chicago, or are they going to do this beforehand? That's still the most important question. But then all those other questions remain. So the big takeaway here, what we can answer for sure, is that Biden's delegates are not bound to do as he wishes. They are likely to do as he wishes, but they're not bound to it. So if Obama comes up with a last-minute mulligan, he's the boss. They could go with him. Unlikely, but that is possible.
Can you imagine how much Kool-Aid you have to have running through your veins to become a Democratic Party delegate?
Oh, yeah.
They'll do as they're told.
They will do as they're told if Obama makes a move, because he's the only notable person who has left his options open there. Maybe that's why he did. But this could be resolved in as little as 14 days or as long as a month. I think it's in the interest of the party leadership to get this wrapped up by the first week of August so that they get the signage and the marketing materials ready for the convention. Then again, that comes with shutting out any semblance of a democratic process, which, I mean, do the Democrats, are they going to let that stop them? They never really have. So my guess now, if I have to double down and make another prediction, see, I don't just bask in the glory of being right once. I'm going to follow this up with a second time. I think they're going to try to get this nomination done first week of August. I don't think they're going to want to go to the convention. I don't think they're going to want another month to go by on the calendar without knowing the nominee. Time is money. Money.
Yeah, I think you're right. They're already so behind the 8 ball.
Yeah,
as it is, and they've wanted Kamala for 8 years.
Right.
Why would they have some kind of a floor fight? And besides that, Whitmer and Newsom, as you pointed out, this election is already damaged goods. Why would they want it? Yeah. So at that point, who's left? Who's going to mount a floor challenge?
No, the only person who could theoretically do it would be one of these unknown white bread assholes like Josh Shapiro, Andy Beshear, Dean. I don't think it would be Phillips because he already, burned his bridges with them by challenging Biden, but like an Andy Bashir type, who are like, hey, you're a generic unknown Democrat who pollsters say they prefer to Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, so why don't you try it? I mean, you're never going to be president on your own merits anyway, so here's a chance. Here, go do your best. Like, maybe.
Sure. And
Very
they're not going to
unlikely.
want to risk that.
Very unlikely. Very unlikely. It's almost certainly going to be Kamala, and that's it. They're just going to have to live with that. I mean, she's the relief pitcher. She gets the ball. That's it. Like, it's that simple. Only arm in the bullpen. You're vice president. President's out. You're the understudy. You're the one who knows the lines. Get up there and give it your best. That's it.
Listen, this watching the remaining party faithful try to put lipstick on that pig is going to be the funniest fucking election season ever. And now I'm looking forward to it. It was all kind of grim before. Watching Kamala run for president against Donald Trump, every day is going to be like Christmas.
Against Trump, too. That's the other thing.
Against
right?
Trump.
Against Trump. Yeah.
This is, they say they don't make great sitcoms anymore. Well, here you go.
Yeah. Exactly.
The greatest sitcom of all time is going to unfold over the next 106 days.
Please clap.